Thank you, Jerry. You all are in for a real treat. How many of you are sitting next to somebody you already know? Raise your hand if you're sitting next to somebody you already know. So I can't really see, but that's a lot of you. Okay, I want you to stand up and go stand next to somebody you don't know. Stand up, it's after lunch, you need to stretch anyway. Stand, and then I'm gonna tell you what to do. Find somebody you do not know. And come closer. You can move your seat closer. Okay, everybody has somebody they don't know. Okay, I want you to repeat after me. You know, part of my background is being Pentecostal and in that kind of a church, and on Sunday, shh. I'm talking now, I've got it back. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to look eyeball to eyeball. Look at them eyeball to eyeball. Look at your new person, eyeball to eyeball. I can see you. You're not doing it, eyeball to eyeball. And I want you to say, I see you. I see you. And then the other person say it back, I see you. All right, go sit down. So, a part of the equity work, a part of our effort around equity is being able to see and connect with people that we would not normally connect with. And you are about to have an opportunity to hear from providers from New Orleans and Texas and Boston who are actually doing the work, who have worked with QRIS. This is a real privilege, but you have to be able to think about, hear, and see their experiences and take this as one opportunity, but go home to your hometowns and find ways to do it as well. Hearing the voices of providers is key to the success of advancing QRIS. You know, Pedro talked yesterday about, or maybe I talked yesterday about, universal versus a targeted strategy. We've got, QRIS is very universal. We have got to be able to see people in their individual context, in their individual situation, in order to support our kids and to support our families. And so I encourage you to do that as you go back home, to think about, am I really seeing the person, their condition or situation? Look, I worked in the state, and I know there were providers who went, oh, if we could just, this provider's never gonna meet that standard. You know, it's gonna take 8 years for them to get an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree or this home or this facility. Our job is to see that and figure out how to invest in those things that will make a difference. And so think about the providers that maybe you've written off as you hear this panel and you think about your questions. Think about those providers who can't meet your standards that we've set, those providers who don't respond to you and what's making them not respond, and ask yourself the question, do I really understand it from their perspective? And so you're getting ready to get a chance to hear from a group of providers. They're going to tell their story. You'll get a chance to ask them questions, but I want you to take this as a single opportunity and encourage you to create more opportunities. Now, I thought there was a slide there that's not there, so let me do this. So I'm going to introduce Marie St. Fleur, who I've known probably like 10 years now. Passionate, organizational. She and I used to be on different sides of the aisle. I was the commissioner and she was the legislator. That didn't always go so well. And she would call me late in the evening and say, now Sherry, you know, she lived in Boston. She's very connected to providers. She's got legislative and municipal and legal experience. She's worked with private resources, but always trying to transform the lives of children and families. Regardless of what her job has been, I've always known her to have that firsthand story from the neighborhood, from the community. In fact, it's not in her bio, but I know lots of her family members moved out of their original community, and she still lives in that community and considers herself to be a resident and connected. You know, her experience as an attorney, a legislator, a senior leader in municipal government and nonprofits really helped drive grassroots research around early ed. She's fought hard for the workforce and compensation, really advocating for change that expanded the ability for us to hear from families and to hear from providers. And even as a legislator and post being a legislator, which she did for 11 years, continued continue to make opportunities to bring that voice to the table. She was appointed by Mayor Thomas Menino as Chief Advocacy for Strategic Investment in the City of Boston. So she also gets this story from a small business perspective, that this isn't just about early childhood, it's about neighborhoods, it's about communities, and it's about really developing small businesses. As I said, she served in the Massachusetts House of Representatives for 11 years. She was the first Haitian American elected to that state office in the United States and the first woman to serve as vice chair for the House Committee on Ways and Means. And again, right. You know, and there's a quote that somebody says, it's you know, being first is not the goal. The goal is to have somebody follow you. And she works hard every day working to make sure other people can take her place. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Marie. You're in for a treat. Listen to their stories, get your questions together, because this is your opportunity to rethink those that you're not connected with.
Oh, you're too much, though. Thank you. Good afternoon. All right, are you guys enjoying this QRIS National Conference in Dallas? I actually am learning so much. I want to start by saying thank you to Sherry. Sherry actually introduced me to Build, and it has been really a wonderful experience. I've learned so much and have been able to meet some amazing people, so I'm so delighted to be here. QRIS is an important tool. It's a tool to elevate the quality of care. The policies, tools, and structures used to implement QRIS must integrate equity at every stage. And so what this is an opportunity for us to have a real nice conversation. It can't be one-on-one. So as you listen to us, please be ready to come join us at the mic. Let me explain how this will happen this afternoon. We're going to have each panelist, these amazing women. I've had the chance to get to know them. Since April, I've spent a lot of time with them on the phone, and you're going to get to hear why. They're awesome. Each of them are going to be given an opportunity, 5 or so minutes to present, right, on their area of focus. I'm going to interject for about 5 minutes with each of them towards the end. I'm going to question and answers from here. At the conclusion of all 3 presentations and my immediate questions with them, we're going to invite you to join in that conversation with us, and we hope it's a really active one. So let's frame this at least for this panel anyway. What is the QRIS standard? And I was so intrigued by Susan's statement yesterday from her kids, who said, because I happen to love this picture. And she talked about, and her kids asked, why this wall? Isn't that a great question? Adults don't ask that question enough. And I think you're right, why this wall? In this instance, we say that wall is QRIS for many communities, for many providers, for many coaches, for many funders. That QRIS is the wall. And what we collectively try to do as we engage is try to figure out how intentional are we in making certain that there are real pathways to get over that wall. That we have the tools, everybody has the tools from whatever position they sit in this work to be able to see over that wall and get to the best outcome. I don't know who put this together, but I love this picture because it really speaks to where we are as a country and what we need to try to do. So we need to figure out how we give everyone, no matter where they are, the tools to conquer that wall. How is where it gets interesting. So QRIS is just a standard. It's just a tool. It's the what. How we do it is where this conversation really, really happens, right? And it's interesting. So as we put out these standards, the people who fund, who evaluate, who coach, who assess, some of these systems that are involved in early education and early learning must have the insight and the foresight to make certain that proper scaffolding exists to help each person, program, and child get over that wall and meet that standard, to be able to use that tool. That's what this is really about. That's what it's about. And so we think nothing of it when we walk by a building and we see scaffolding, right? Before that building stand on its own, There's all the scaffolding that's holding it up. That building doesn't just come up on its own. But we know that as part of building, we need to put these structures up to support that building until that building happens on its own. We don't think about that for children. We don't think about it for coaches. We don't think about it for teachers. We don't think about it for English as a second language learners. Everybody needs scaffolding of some sort in order to get the product that we need. And that's what we're in the business of. And I want to tell you, it doesn't happen overnight. It happens with time. Equity comes into play in the how. It is a critical ingredient in all aspects of QRIS. Now, I'm becoming an empty nester, and I want to tell you why I've been thinking about this equity thing as I thought about coming here. I've been trying to create new ways of spending my time, and one of the ways I've started baking. God help my children. You know, I started baking, and I started breaking bread. And I want to use this analogy. I don't know if it'll work for you, but it's been working in my head. You know, yeast is a very important ingredient when you bake bread. Anybody bake? Yeah? And you know that if you don't put that yeast in there at the very beginning, right, you're going to end up with a rock, right? Right? And so you know when you put that yeast in, it takes a little time. It's interesting. And it's that yeast that really helps you get the rise and that fluffy texture that we all have come to accustomed to with bread. Unlike baking powder that sort of rises right away, with the yeast, it takes time, right? You have to work that yeast in there. You have to knead it. You have to let it sit. You then go back and look at it before you throw it in that oven and it bakes. Because you know what? Before you throw it in that oven, a lot of work has gotten into it, isn't it? You know, if you've been baking any bread. So we know that that yeast is an essential ingredient. Well, so is equity. You can't look at the end game and say, well, we'll look at equity now. You've got to start looking at equity as you're putting it in. It's part of that central ingredient in order to get it right. What we do know is if we do it, if we work it, if we make the adjustments, if we take the time, inevitably, equity is going to lead us to better outcomes for all. So when you're doing your work wherever you sit, I ask you, as you listen to these amazing women, if yeast is your rising agent in bread, what is your rising agent? What's your rising agent? Because it's that rising agent that's going to help all of us get over that wall. And that is what we have to be intentional about our rising agent. And so today, with these three amazing panel of experts, they're going to share with you some of the things they use for their rising agent. They are critical voices in this work. And I want to first introduce you to all of them, and then we're going to start right off. Our first person you're going to hear from is Pearlie Harris. She is the executive director and president of Royal Castle Child Development Center. Now, Pearlie is, you'll see more about her, but one of the things I want to point out about Pearlie, besides being the executive director, she believes the importance and necessity of early childhood development. She believes that if she reflects a strong work ethic, she can successfully hire and train staff to believe in that too. She establishes very sturdy relationships with programs, local and those from afar, in order to enrich her program at Royal Castle, but also to assure the growth of the children that she interfaces with. So please, this is Pearlie Harris. You're going to hear back soon. We're going to hear from her, Pearlie. Our next panelist that you'll hear from is Bridget Hebbert. By the way, Pearlie is from New Orleans. And so we're excited that she's here with us, and you're going to hear a little bit more about that. Bridget Hebbert is from Massachusetts. Bridget is the only one on the panel who's a family provider. And I'm terrible at this, as I told you. She also is a bilingual provider. She believes in partnering with families to provide the best possible experiences for children in a setting that promotes discovery and learning in all areas of development. She is proud of her success with kids from diverse languages and backgrounds and needs, and she encourages her parents to participate in programming and receive ongoing communication and support. So we're looking forward to hear from Bridget. Then the last panelist is going to be Tobitha Stromile, and she is going to focus on literacy and staffing. And she is the owner of Wise Preschool. And she's from right here in Dallas. So Dallas, you gave us Tobitha, all right? And she has an innovative program over at Wise. But you know what caught me about her bio? She looks at this as a ministry, which actually was that she is part of her ministering is to make certain that she provides a culturally sensitive learning environment for our students, and that they all her and her staff remain dedicated to increasing education in the classroom, increasing education of the instructors, and making certain that parental involvement and community support is an integral part of her work. In all their bios, what I found amazing is none of them did this work on their own. They understood the value of family, and they understood the value of community in order to make this work. And so with that, I am going to turn it over to Ms. Pearlie Harris, who's going to share with you her work at Royal Castle Kids in New Orleans. Okay?
Good afternoon. I am the owner and director of Royal Castle Child Development Center, where kids are worth more than gold. We opened February of 1996. We were the first 5-star center in the greater New Orleans area. I didn't like it at first. We are also NACE accredited. We are a blended center that serves 100 students 6 weeks to 5 years old. We have 20 Head Start slots with Total Community Action. We have 23 early Head Start slots with Kingsley House. We have 16 non-public pre-K-4 slots with the state of Louisiana, and we service child care assistance children and private paying families. During the summer, when our pre-K-4 children graduate in May, we have a partnership with the New Orleans Recreation Department for 25 summer campers. Presently, we have 13 Caucasian students, 1 Chinese student, 3 children from India, 3 Hispanic students, and the remainder are African American students. Also, at least 10% of our children have IEPs and are IFSPs. We have 17 teachers, 1 cook, 1 family advocate, 1 director / nurse, student nurse, 4 floaters and at Royal Castle, and we also have 1 advocate that we share with another center. Just like the teachers start their year off assessing their new students, I too assess my parents. Yes, many families return, but we always have new families who join in with us. And so the climate at Royal Castle, the family climate changes. So I kick my family advocate engagement piece off with a mandatory orientation. And at that mandatory orientation, this is where we talk about what parents can expect. I also give parents a calendar for the year with all of the different activities, and we always try to have at least 1 parent-child activity per month, because we really want parents to come to the center. We also, this is a time at parent orientation where parents can sign up to be volunteers, and they give us input on what type of topics they want at the parent input meeting. At our parent input meetings, which is held at every 3rd Wednesday of the month, this is a time where we bring in guests. Based on what the parents have said to me, or what they want to hear, and what they would like to get more information on. And so on one of the slides, the slide they just showed, we had someone come in from LSU. We do a lot of partnerships in the community, and we had them come in and talk about how to go shopping and buy healthy food on a dime, on a budget, because we know it's very hard for a lot of our parents to purchase food and eat healthy when you're on low income. Also, I noticed some of my families were coming in and the children were just hopping in and out of the cars and they weren't in car seats. And everyone at Royal Castle should be in car seats. So I actually had someone come out, the state trooper, to talk about car seat safety and give parents information. And then parents had an opportunity to sign up to, for the state trooper to actually check to see if the car seats were installed correctly. So that's some of the things we talk about at our parent input meetings. We are always looking in the community to bring people in to bring information to our parents to help them. And so one of the programs we did, we wrote a grant for, was with Primetime Reading Program. And there's a word at Royal Castle that we never mention, and that word is free. I never say the word free. I find when you say the word free, people don't value it, and they don't come.
Thank you.
So we don't use the word free. So for this particular program, it was only supposed to be open for 15 families. And so what we did, we put a table in the lobby and we asked parents to sign up for this. You have a chance for your child to win a slot for this reading program. And so we had so many parents sign up that we ended up asking, could we expand it to 25 parents? And so what happened, we put all of the parents' name in a hat, and we pulled out 25 families, and then we put in the lobby, congratulations, your child just won a slot for this reading program, which is held, it was a 6-week program. And if you would have seen the parents when they came in, I mean, they were jumping up and down, oh man, my baby won a slot. So, and we actually had, for this 6-week program, we had perfect attendance. 15 of those families had perfect attendance for this reading program. We also were very fortunate to have First Lady Michelle Obama come to Royal Castle. It just makes you really feel good when you're working every day and someone noticed what you do. And it felt so good for not just me, but my staff and the families that attend Royal Castle, for her to come and read to our children. We had participated in an Eat, Sleep, and Play program with Louisiana Children's Museum, and also we were a part of the Let's Move program. And so she came and read stories to the children and interacted with our families. So that was really a special high point for us. We do a lot of things with our family. I find that to get families involved, you have to have a relationship with your families. I'm always there in the morning. Hey, Dad, how you doing? You're such a great dad. Hey, Mom, you know, you need a sticker today. We just say lots of things to really buff them up and make them feel really good about what they're doing, and that their work as the first teacher is important. So we had a health fair. I try to do things around parents' schedule. I try to be very sensitive to that. And so we brought in different vendors for the health fair, and they set up tables in our yard. We had demonstrations on cooking, they gave out recipes. We actually had Walgreens do free flu shots for not only the parents, but also our staff. And then once the parents go around, and they always have to go with their child because it has to be a parent-child theme. And once they went around to all the vendors, they left. I had a partnership with the New Orleans Library, and they gave out free books to the family. So the children left with vegetables and fruits, and they also left with books. So that was our health fair. We also do something at the beginning of the school year. I love my grandparents. You gotta love your grandparents. And at the beginning of the school year, just like I give the parents their little mandatory orientation, I give an orientation to my grandparents. And I encourage my grandparents to please come anytime. Open door policy is for you also, and I give them the calendar of events so that they can participate in the parent-child activities. It's open to them. And so I find a lot of times when you can't get parents to do what you need them to do, you can get it from the grandparents. You can get it because they truly want the best for their grandchild. And they want their grandchild to be very successful. So I always get the grandparents' information. And then I read a story to the grandparents about giraffes can't dance, and I always ask the question, who's in your grandchild's ear? Are they saying positive things to your grandchild? You know, make sure they're doing this. Just like the giraffe had someone, the cricket said something very positive to him, that you just need to find your own music. So I always like to really get my grandparents involved. And then keep going. That's the grandparents. And then we also, this picture here, I'd like to tell you a quick short story if I can. This little girl, her name is Brandy. I'll just name her Brandy. She came to our center this school year in the pre-K4 program. She was very, very shy. She only could recognize one letter, and that was the letter B. She recognized a circle, and she could count from 1 to 10. Her social skills were horrible. And she thought her skin was black, and she thought her white shirt was yellow. And her dad was recently incarcerated, and he had not finished high school, and her mama had not finished high school. And she was so far behind. And I really held the mom and dad's hand all the way. I told Dad, we're gonna get her ready. We really need you to go and get her library card. We really need you to just, even if you don't read the book to her, just show her the pictures and talk about the pictures, and I want you to come to everything at Rawcastle. This man was on it. I mean, he came to everything. And this particular picture, thanks. This particular picture, we take our pre-K4 children to go and visit kindergarten classrooms. And he and the mom both came on that field trip visit. And they were sitting down while other parents were interacting, playing on their cell phones. And I'm like, I said, Dad, I really want you to go and see what she's doing on the computer. And he did. He got up and he went to see what she was doing. And her face, guys, if you would have saw it, lit up. She was just so proud to show her dad what was going on the computer. And believe it or not, I worked really, really hard with this family. And this little girl left our center. And I don't want to cry. She left, I mean, knowing her letters, her numbers, her phonics. I mean, she knew sight words. She was able to interact with her friends. I mean, she was such a happy little girl. But most of all, her parents left ready. They know how to advocate for their child.
All right, that's what I'm talking about.
And here you see her there, she's coloring. I mean, she's a happy camper. And then I want to say real quickly with this is one of my Hispanic families, and the oldest little girl there, her name is Brittany. She came to me not too long ago because she finished at Rawcastle, and she said, Miss Harris, I want to show you something. And she just started reading. She wanted to show me that she could read. We actually helped her mom get her into a really great school. She will be able to speak, it's a French school, so she'll be speaking French, Spanish, and English. And her mom, I gotta tell you what her mom said to me, and I'll never forget this. She said, Miss Harris, she said, my wings are clipped. She said, but hers are not. She still have a chance to fly. Just did something. Woo! I have never met not one parent who doesn't want the best for their child. They want the best. It may not look like what we wanted, but they want the best.
So, come on now. Aren't these folks experts? Excellent. So, she just gave you so many examples about ways of making this equity thing work, right? And it's really about supporting parents. That family engagement is so critical. So we've got a couple questions for you, Pearlie, before we move to Bridget. You know, there's a lot of conversations around expulsion and the fact that we are expelling babies from daycare, essentially, or early learning environments. How have you been able to work through family engagement to really minimize that in your place, at your place?
I've been open since February of 1996, which is about, 21 years, and I have only put out 2 children. And that's because it was becoming such a health and safety issue that I had no choice. But the way I make it work, we have staffing. We bring the families in and we talk about what are you doing at home to help your child? Because this is what we're trying here. And then if we need to, we bring in help, because we can reach out to universities and we ask them to come and help us work with that child. And then sometimes we may have to shorten that child's day until they become successful, but we work really, really hard with the parents, and we work with an expert who can help us to really get that child ready. So we try very hard never to put a child out.
So, and can you talk a little bit, I mean, I know that you mentioned the number of kids who need special support. So can you talk a little bit about how your assessment process and how you help the child, but also help the parents as you move them through that assessment process?
So what happens once our children come in, the first thing we do is we do what's called an ages and stages, and I know you saw that out there. And we do a screening can do. And then the teachers begin to do observations. Sometimes they have to do home visits, or sometimes we just observe, and then when we see things that look like we may need to address, then we actually get with the parents and we talk about it. And we ask, is he doing it at home? Because we don't see it here. And then once we do that, if we feel like a child needs to have further intervention, then we'll have, we have what's called early steps in our state. And then we have child search. We ask parents to make that referral, or I can make that referral. And we have an expert actually come in and work with that child and do an assessment. And then if that child needs more than that, then they'll come and do therapy in the center.
So talk to me a little bit about, you know, the parent that you talked about, the dad, if we go back for a little bit. I mean, it's just the time that it takes. So when you worked with that dad, to walk our friends here through some of the work that you were able to do with the dad, and she has a mom. So what was that interaction as you really try to provide support? I
really had to work with their schedule. A lot of times it was doing pickup. I mean, you can call them and say, we want you to come in, but a lot of times it was, Dad, you know, can I speak to you a minute? You know, I really want to see Brandolyn get such and such and such and such. And then it was, you know, can I get with you and Mom and talk about whatever? Sometimes it was a phone call. And then during pickup time, I would say to Dad, you know, you're such a great dad. Wow, look at you, you're gonna get a sticker today. But it's just things like that, believe it or not, it really makes people feel great. They feel good about it. And so I also work with the grandmother, because the grandmother really was involved with this, because she felt like the mom kind of was a little, she said, well, I'm not going to say what she said, Mom was a little lazy. But she said she's going to see to it that her grandbaby is ready for kindergarten. So I think she really got on the parents, and she really made them step up. But it was really just working with him, doing pickup time and in the mornings, just having conversations with him. But I really held their hand. And believe it or not, he came to a lot of our parent input meetings, and we made sure she was one of the children that name got picked in that prime time. So she got picked.
I mean, but look how that equity scaffolding worked, right? Look how that equity scaffolding worked. And to know what was on, you know, and I love that story because so many things gets illustrated there, right, Pearlie? Because you just saved your state so much money. Because if you didn't do the work with the parent, that child would have been tracked for special needs, wouldn't it?
Yes, you would.
Because they would have made assumptions about it. See what equity does when you really think about it strategically? And think about Dad. Think about Dad. You know, we assume that people know what to do, right? Yes. But she just actually helped Dad become involved in the education of his. You don't know what Dad's education had been. You don't know what Dad's interaction with public schools or whatever school he was in had been. Right. But look what she did. She got him engaged and involved, right? Isn't that special? That's what you all do. That's what you all do. I mean, it's amazing. And then, but you also did another thing. You created an advocate for that child, right? Moving through the school process.
Right.
So you've actually, and with that interaction, you did at least 3 things here
Right.
that actually saved the state of Louisiana some money, and they need to understand that. All right?
Right.
So let's talk about how you work with your parents around school attendance, because you know how we hear parents, homes are not stable. How does that family engagement help you make certain that your attendance works?
Well, what we do to make sure, because we really need these children to come to school, so what we do, we make phone calls. I have a relationship with my parents, and we have a family advocate, and then we have teachers that call and ask, what's going on? I haven't seen her. Is she sick, et cetera? So we always calling and following up with the children. That's how we make it work.
So there's one question I'm going to ask each and every one of you. Now, you see all this work you've done with parents. Now, there are evaluators who show up for 2 or 3 hours at your place. How do you get them to understand that equity matters, and how do you help them support these families better?
Right now, our state is changing up our QRIS system here a little bit, because we're now looking at report cards, which I'm not feeling right now. But we do a lot with our families, and I don't think they're going to be measuring that. So that's a shame.
So think about your questions now for Pearlie. So we're gonna, because I think there's so much more that we can ask her, right? Right? And so we're gonna move to Bridget. And so after we've heard from Pearlie about family engagement, we're gonna come back, because there's a layers to this family engagement. Now we're gonna talk to Bridget about safety and nurturing environment, and particularly when you are in a home-based program and you're renting your space. Now, how do you make that space work for families and the children? Bridget?
Good afternoon. My name is Bridget, and I'm going to introduce the QRIS standards from Massachusetts, and the QRIS standards leads to equality and value. The Mass QRIS standards have 5. I am going to talk about 2 of these categories, which is category 2 and 5. Standard 2, safe, health, indoor and outdoor. There are 3 to 4 interest areas: learning center, dramatic play, book, science, blocks, manipulative writing. Unless you live in Massachusetts, unless you live in a high-income neighborhood, family childcare like myself need accessible to funding in order to purchase these educational supplies and equipment that I need to stock each and every area. I was fortunate to receive the QRIS grant to help me purchase some of these materials, such as the writing area, as you can see there, the shelves, the rug and floor, the chairs, the cubbies. Without the QRIS grant, I would not be able to have this area set up the way it is set up. The interest area this is the kitchen area. Can you move this slide?
Oh, you want me to? Okay.
Yeah. This is the area where they do the manipulative play. This is the cupboard with all the belongings and the mats. This is an activity that we made early April. It's just a seed that was planted in a bag and put at the window.
Yep, so you can continue.
All right. Sorry. Family child care educators have to have access to funding in order to purchase these supplies to stimulate children's interest in a variety of ways. Learning centers that create welcoming, comforting environment for children contribute to overall equality and in the program.
So tell me a little bit about your center. So we've seen the pictures, but tell us a little bit about the neighborhood that it's located in and how many children that you have in this center.
I serve 6 children, and I'm in the Dorchester area of Boston. And I live in a 3rd floor apartment building. So it's an apartment where I live also, but at the same time, I let it work for me because I move things around. For instance, it's summertime now, and I have water and sand table, so I would have to move the table or the manipulative stuff to able to put out the sand and water table for the kids to be able to have that to use and enjoy it at the same time.
So talk a little bit some of the challenges of being in a rental space with perhaps the landlord as well as working with evaluators as they come in to see whether or not your space is nurturing enough.
Sure.
Yeah.
Some of the challenges I face in an apartment is I always have to be on top of the landlord to do certain things that is needed to be done in the building to able to pass inspection, such as painting or fixing a barrier that is broken or a door that is broken. So those are some of the challenges I face living in an apartment building, but it works. I make it work for me and the children that I serve.
And so what have your families liked about, why would families bring their children to you instead of sending them off to, say, a center-based program where there's a larger space? And so talk about that a little bit.
I usually serve most teenagers' parents, like from the 14 to 16 years old. So these are babies that are having babies of their own. So what I find that works for me is I work with those parents. I try to help them to raise the children and understand that what the values are, what they need to do for these kids.
So talk a little bit more, give a little bit more definition around that, about how you do that. Give us a story, illustrate.
A simple story is that I have a little boy, he's 2 years old now. The mother is just turned 16 years old. She lives at home with her mother, which is ill. And I guess the mother fell down and she had to been rushed to the hospital. So the teen parent was called from school, so she ended up going to the hospital also to meet her mom. And when the bus went to drop the child off at home, there was nobody there. So the bus driver called me back and said, "Bridget, there is nobody there. What should I do with this child?" So I said, "Bring him back to the center." So the driver brought the child back there. I had to feed the child, wait to get in communication with the parents. It was like 9 o'clock at night. But after the mom came from the hospital and I called them, I ended up dropping the child off to their home. And I mean, I felt good in a way because he was safe, he was sound, and they knew at that point that he was with me.
So there's a trust that you've been able to build with this family that would allow that to happen. And you're also more flexible in terms of you're able to be flexible to be available to the family.
Exactly, yes.
Okay. So talk to me a little bit about how you make the neighborhood work for you, because you're on the 3rd floor of apartment. And, you know, part of the QRIS requires that they get some fresh air.
Correct.
And they get out and about. And so what are some of the ways that the municipality has to be helpful to someone like you, providing that business?
In renovating the park, which they just renovated this park where I usually take the kids to. The way the park was before versus now, I used to have to go there and clean up before I can make the kids then play. There would be needles over the place, trash over the place. So they renovated the park, which is safe. It's like that squashy sponge, so if anyone of them fall, I don't feel like they're going to get hurt. They have a beautiful fence that is secure, so I know the kids cannot come out. So that was a great job they did on the park. It just was open 3 months ago.
So that's been very, so talk to me a little bit about, so you have, as I'm terrible at this, one of the things, because you know, one of the things about a family provider is you're on your own a lot. So it's not like you have colleagues to sort of check in with during the day. So you have about 5 or 6 kids?
6 kids, yes.
Okay. How do you manage that when one's throwing a tantrum? What are the ways that you're able to manage that in that space? How do you give them that attention, that equitable attention that they need to support their development? So tell me, how do you help them?
The way I do it is, for instance, if I'm changing one of the baby and one of the bigger kids needs something, or what I usually do, I ask them if they can give me 5 minutes just to finish doing what I'm doing with the baby, and after that, that's going to be their turn. And they have a pretty understanding about it, and it works for me.
And so you don't find that a problem. So how do you use your different stations in order to keep them involved while you work with the baby? How do you do that?
The way I do it, before they get there in the morning, whatever the curriculum is for the day, I have it set out. So as they come in, they kind of get engaged in it while I go off and get the breakfast, or I'm attending the baby, and that pretty much worked for me.
So talk to me about how you interact with the families. When you bring a family in and they look at your space, how do they know what's happening with their children on a day-to-day basis?
Okay. I have a schedule that I give to the parents, and I usually have it post up also the whole week what is going to be happening. I email parents if any field trip is going to come up, let them know where I'm going to be, what day the field trip is going to be, and stuff like that, and it works. That's work.
I also know that English is not your first language, and so so I want to give her a hands up for this, so, and she's been doing this, and you have multilingual kids in your program. How do you work with them?
The way I work with them, I have the classroom labeled in English and Spanish, and I also have most of my books, I have them in English and Spanish. So whenever I read the English version, I read the Spanish version, so they start picking up and understanding the language. Plus, there is this thing on YouTube now, thanks to technology, that all those sound them like The Wheel on the Bus and Baba Black Sheep, all those sound, there is on YouTube and in Spanish also. So I usually have the iPad. When we sing it in English, I put it on in Spanish, and that's how they're going learning the language.
And so I'm going to ask you that last question before I move on, around evaluators. Now, I know you have many people coming into your home.
Right.
And how consistent are evaluators? When you're in a family provider and you have different ones come in, what is some of your experiences about some of the feedback you have, if it's not the same one that comes back? What are some of your experiences with that?
Some of the experiences that I don't think we're on the same page.
No, explain.
For instance, I had a parent that called me and asked me not to give the baby milk for 3 days because he was really congested. So I respected that, but I gave them the other components that was required for the lunch. And it was an announced visit from the food department. So she asked me why the baby wasn't drinking milk. So I said, because this was a request from one of the parents. She wrote me up and said that they was not going to pay me for that day for lunch because I was supposed to give the baby milk. I said, well, this was a request from the parents, and I think I needed to respect that. So those are some of the challenges I find.
So we need to really talk about evaluators and understanding parental agency, and so the right of a parent to make decisions about their child, some of the things that we need to talk about. So thank you so much, Bridget, and continue to do this great work. Oh my God, very good. You did great. You did great. All right, and so now we move to Tobitha Stromile, who's going to yes, Dallas. All right, who's going to focus on literacy, the work that she does on literacy and staffing, and how a lot of that is sustained at her program. Tobitha.
So, good evening, good afternoon to everyone.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for allowing us to come and speak. I am the director for WISE Academy in Cedar Hill, which is about 15 minutes southwest of Dallas. So we choose to say that we're the best of the Southwest. I have been the director for WISE Academy for 20 years. I started, unlike my colleague, June of 1997. Prior to that, I was a former classroom teacher in the public school district for Arlington. I just realized that so many of our African American children were struggling with the basics of phonics and reading. So I took it upon myself to step out on faith and try to acquire my own center. And my goal was to make sure that every child that came through our doors were benefiting from education that would help them as they go along throughout their childhood and through elementary school, through high school, even through college. So I decided to purchase a center, not knowing the basics of business, but I did. My father owned his own business, but it was printing, so printing and childcare are not the same. And there's a such thing as when you purchase land, that's property taxes. So those taxes get you, you have payroll taxes, property taxes, and I was like, what? So those dip into your bottom line, which is your money, your finances. So it took me a minute to get a handle on how to make sure each one of my classrooms, thinking from a business aspect, how each one of my classrooms were able to bring in the dollars that I needed in order to produce quality staff that will be able to teach children. So therefore, probably about, my son is 14 years ago, I chose to stop accepting infants and toddlers because I realized that that was eating up my bottom line of my finances. And I am here to say that working with, my center is a nonprofit now, and for the last several years, we love coming to work with 2 to 12-year-olds. We love it. We stay full. We have about 38% of our children are low-income subsidized care children. We cater to private paying parents as well as the parents that are on subsidy care. I love Child Care Group, I must say that publicly. The Child Care Group has been able, I partner with them, and so with the Child Care Group I have been able to receive curriculum. I have been able to send my staff through professional development training for implementing assessments. So therefore, we feel like our program is really unique in which we take each child and we know individually what each child is capable of, where they are, so we will know where to go with them as we are teaching. The staff also use the assessments to help curtail their lesson plans, and so that way that allows them to know individually what each child needs assistance in as far as identifying the exact letter a child does not know, as far as working with rhyming skills, onset rhyme, just the different aspects that go into literacy. I must say technology has made literacy complex. We have to really, because we have a generation of children that are so focused, parents are so focused on giving their children their phones, and they're consistently playing games and playing games and playing. And when you get that child into the classroom and you're trying to actually teach the child or work with letters or work with numbers or shapes or colors or however, the kids are like this because the phones are like this. And so you have to make sure that you have activities that are, we have hands-on activities for every center. Each one of our classrooms has at least 7 to 9 learning centers. So the teachers have to make sure that if you're working with numbers for the day, that they have manipulatives, whether it's bears for counting or working with addition or subtraction, you have bears or blocks, or if we're working with science, you have, if we're doing sink and float, the children have in that center, they have a tank or a bowl or whatever is available, and you make sure you have objects for them to test to see whether it sinks or floats. So we try to do things that are concrete to help children build and learn. So we have that for each one of our centers. Literacy is, like I said, it's very complex, it's very difficult, but we do try to maintain and making sure that our children are well aware of their alphabets, the phonics. I go back, I teach phonics. I'm a firm believer that phonics worked for me. And so we work with phonics a lot. We have homework for the children. And parents are like, homework for preschool? Yes, we do. We have homework, and then that also allows parents to spend quality time in trying to understand what their children are learning in school. We also have a reading program. And so my apologies because I did not bring enough pictures for you to understand what we do. But we try to give each child a free book. The first couple of years we did it, we had a grant. And so we received books through, mine went blank. We received books for the children to have a free book each month to build personal libraries, because we're trying to make sure that the parents and the children understand that they need to have a passion for reading. So right now we still give out free books to the children, but we try to do it on a quarterly basis. Funding has become extremely limited, so we still are able to purchase and give and provide the families with books. Have I missed? I could talk to you all day, but let's see.
I have some questions for you, as you know.
Okay.
So one of the things we wanted to focus you on was the staffing piece. And really it's around the equity, around making certain that we continue to grow, keep quality staff and center-based programs, given the, because we did want you to focus on the economics of it, because it's expensive. And people are making decisions around that, the economics of it, as you just heard from Tobitha. So how are you able to really keep your staff professional development in child development, and for those that you've been able to grow that, and for those who don't have it, how are you able to help them acquire it?
Okay. I have about 4 staff that have been with me for 20 years. I have about 3 staff that have been with me 4 that have been with me for about 10 to 11 years. I try, is that to tell me to stop?
No, keep going. You're good.
I try to make sure I do simple things for my staff. The first thing I do is, I think it's the atmosphere that we create in our centers, our facilities, or in the home, or however. I do not consider us as a daycare, because we are not taking care of the day. I consider us
I like that.
I consider us a child care facility. For my staff, I consider my staff as child care classroom instructors or facilitators. The reason why I say that is because there are, from the district, you think of the teachers sitting at their own desk and the children are in their desk. Our classrooms are set up totally different. As I said, there are different learning areas in the classroom, and so the teachers have to be engaged and they have to walk around. For our centers, there are usually no more than 2 to 3 children per center. That allows each child to have access to the activities or the manipulatives that are at the table to be engaged in. So the staff has to be intentional about walking around, being engaged, asking those open-ended questions to the children as they're coming by. What are you drawing? oh, really? Well, why are you drawing your mom? What is your mother doing? Or just asking those questions to get the children to think and to answer. So we do a lot of the open-ended questions. As far as staff, once again, I must say I'm very excited to be a partner with the child care group and also with Educational First Steps. They provide professional development training classes free. She doesn't like the word free, but every now and then, free is, it's a benefit. But it is difficult. We do pay our staff to sit in trainings. I do require my staff to have additional hours above what the state has provided that we have. We're also an accredited center. So even being accredited, you are required to have more professional development hours. And so I make sure that the staff is very engaged and intentional about knowing exactly which classes they need to take annually. They have a list that they keep. We go through that list when it's time for their evaluations to make sure that they have done their trainings in social, emotional, whether it's in transportation or working with children that have disabilities or however. So we try to make sure that is a point for making sure that the staff is responsible for their own professional development, as well as I do also provide, after the staff have been with me for at least 6 months, they are able to take child development classes. That is partnership with Educational First Steps. They help carry the burden of the cost. I also help provide the staff with a stipend once they have received those credentials. The challenge to that is, once they receive the credentials, they have signed a contract with me to at least be there for 18 months to 24 months, so the children can receive the benefit of their learning and teaching, so the children will be able to learn and see what they have grown in as far as their knowledge for professional development and best practices in the classroom. The difficult part is, in Texas, it's an at-will state, and so people are able to leave their job at any given time. And so sometimes you have staff that will come and receive that, those credentials, and they can go to the school districts, the charter schools, even with Head Start, and receive almost twice the pay. They can receive, now understand, I'm a former classroom teacher, but they receive that summer break where they are not working for those 3 summers. They have, now Thanksgiving is a week, Christmas is a month, and then you have spring break. So it is a little difficult to, you want your staff to always do better, learn more, and grow. But it's sometimes difficult because you also want to make sure you keep that staff. And so it's steady, it's always, it's hard trying to balance that. If someone leaves, you know, you have to smile and say, well, thank you, and I do understand that, you know, you're receiving an increase and it's beneficial for your household income. But on the other end, it really hurts inside that you've invested time and money and training with someone and then they leave.
You know, everybody's talking about getting a degree, getting a degree. So what does that mean to you when you say, so I come in with a degree in psychology, is that what you're looking for? Or perhaps, you know, what kind of degree matters to you?
I always have to clean it up for them. I am a degree teacher, so I have my bachelor's. And as I said, you always want people to grow. So I have no problem with a person who has a degree. What becomes difficult to me is when you have, how do I say it? When you have, even with accreditation, because I'm accredited through NAC, there are now certain standards in which they would like for you to have degree teachers in the classroom. That's great, but the only thing, a couple of fallbacks from that. Most of privately owned facilities are not able to afford a degree teacher. We would love to have them, but we're not really able to afford that. The other issue to that is just because you have a degree does not mean that you are qualified to teach in an early childhood, in an early childhood classroom. So,
What exactly do you mean by that?
Well, not at my child care facility, but firsthand, I'm a mother. And my son, his first grade year, had a degree teacher. And she was not degreed in working with children. She was degreed in working with high school students. And I think to this day, it has been a tough road for me as a parent and a couple of other parents who had children in that classroom, to get our kids to understand you are capable of learning, you will learn. I will make sure I implement, whether it's a private tutoring sessions, whatever I have to do as a parent to make sure you get that foundation that you need in order to continue to excel and do well in school. So I'm never against education. I am against, if you are not qualified to connect with a kid, I always tell my staff, you can never teach a kid anything until they understand that you trust them and that you love them. And thank you. So I truly believe that some people are into the education field because of the summer breaks and holidays, and they do not have our children's interest in mind.
I ain't gonna touch that. Okay.
Look,
Now, you know, you want them to be
out.
honest, so they're gonna be honest with you. I want you to talk to me about evaluators, and in terms of why is it important to have cultural and linguistic competencies in that sector?
You're gonna have me put out.
But that's, you all wanna just hear, right? Is that what you wanna do? We do, because part of this is really giving folks tools to go back and recalibrate about how the work is being executed. And that's important, right? Okay.
Yes, it's important. I must say that I've been a validator for NAC as well, because I wanted to know firsthand what validators come in and look for. So I'm an advocate for many things, but I really feel like when evaluators come in, they should have some knowledge in working in a classroom. Kind of like being in the trenches, you don't really know until until you can say, I've been a teacher or I've been a crack addict and I can help you because I've overcome. I mean, I'm not a crack addict. I'm afraid to even do drugs, so, but my mother and father put that fear in me. But I feel like if you have not been there, it's difficult for somebody to get advice from you. You really have no clue or no idea of how to work with children. And when you come in as an evaluator and you say, well, this is not right, or this is not right, or why are they doing this, or why is this happening? If you worked with children and you work in a child care setting, early childhood is totally different from elementary and the rest of the levels of learning. And unless you have, I think it should be a requirement that you should have a certain number of years where you have worked in a child care facility, in a classroom, not a director and not an assistant director, in a classroom to work so you can understand what is happening so you'll know how to do your job better.
All right. All right, these three ladies, thank you. So listen, you've been listening Now it's time for you to ask some questions. And I think the reality is, equity is simply about, I think, in terms of the interpretation, the how. And so think about whatever area that you're working in, what you've heard up there. Do you have any questions that you can ask them about the how in order to translate it to make it possible for families to be more engaged, possible for your staff to be able to continue to stay at your center? What are some of the questions that you think might be helpful if you got an answer from these amazing women? Put your hands together for them, please. I know that there's some mics someplace.
Hello.
So, okay, great, thank you.
I do have a question. It's for the Boston School, but I would love for all of you to answer it because I was really moved by the story of how you went above and beyond the pale to support the family. And we know that many families in low-income communities, many teen parents need extra support. But I don't think our QRIS system has a way to acknowledge the extra work that you all have to do to really meet the needs of the communities that you serve. So I was just wondering that if you could articulate a standard that would acknowledge the extra miles that you have to go to support your families in being successful, what would that standard look like? How would you write that standard?
I would write the standard maybe saying like extra hours standard because I do work beyond 5 o'clock. So maybe that's how I would write it.
Any other thought, Pearlie? You have very good. Any other thought on that?
I know that with NACE, because we are NACE accredited, we're really supposed to engage our families and look at that. So I don't know exactly the standard for it, but NACE has lots of standards for family engagement. And and I know that we try really, really hard to meet all of those standards, and I know we go really beyond what they're asking us to do. So I don't know how I would write the standard. I know you guys, that's what you do. we try to make sure we get it done.
So,
but I don't know.
So isn't that interesting? Because you're asking about the how of equity, because that extra that you do helps that child meet whatever the objective is, or help the family meet, but we don't take that into consideration when we're building a standard. We don't think about those extra steps. And so I do think it's a good question for everybody who's in this room to think about, how do you capture, because the scaffolding that has to be created to support a family, to get them over that wall, to support a child to get over that wall. So what is the extra support? And I guess that's what this is all about, right? We're identifying the things that you do every day. You say, oh, you just do it. But no, it's extra time. Nobody pays you for it, but it's expensive, isn't it? Yes. It's expensive,
Yeah, it is.
right?
Yes.
So that gives us some homework. Thank you.
All right.
Is there some more questions?
Hello. I wanted to thank all three of you for being here. And I wanted to ask you, in your communities, you are role models, it's clear. You're role models for those directors and people who are working in early childhood. And I wonder if you are sought out in your communities and if you work with other people who are doing the same thing as you to help improve other centers in your communities.
Well, I'll start. I do. I partner with NBCDI, which is the National Black Child Development Institute, and we have taken. We've just got our chapter in the Dallas area started within the last year or so. We've taken the initiative because of me. I've kind of voiced that I feel like some centers in our Oak Cliff area are not able to afford accreditation. And even with Texas Rising Star, the standards have been increased and developed and revised. For some people, they think it's difficult to maintain quality care. And so I, along with Dr. Washington, who's our president, and I'm the treasurer for BCDI Dallas, we've taken it upon ourselves to choose 10 centers to help them go through the process of becoming accredited. Nobody really understands what that means, but that means hours of me taking time away from my center and my personal children to go into other centers, to do an assessment and to look at what is going on in their environment of the classroom, of the staff, of everything, and then give them the tools of, hey, just as simple as it might be, well, you need to have centers in the classrooms. Some people still do not understand what it means to have centers in the classrooms. So then I would come in and I would say, have an area right here for a library, have an area right here for math, have an area right here for your science and math, and just the different areas that you can have in your classroom. Then on top of that, I take my time to help them set up the bookshelves and the chairs and the tables, so it's kind of blocked off to where it looks like it's different sections. Then I also take time to help train the staff in understanding that the different standards that come with becoming accredited. Some of the standards seem very difficult to accomplish, like ratio, real simple. Some people think, wow, it's gonna be kind of hard to maintain a teacher and have only, let's say with 2-year-olds, they think, I really should have 11 2-year-olds, but if you really work in a classroom with 11 2-year-olds, you know, that's a little difficult. And so the teachers get an understanding and like the ratios for accreditation because the ratios are lower. The directors and not so much the directors, but the owners have a difficult time understanding that when you lower the ratio, your classroom instructor has a better way of interacting and communicating and teaching and implementing that curriculum with, 7 children instead of 11. So I find myself spending a lot of additional time working with directors to revise policies and procedures, employee handbooks, but I do what I do because I was brought up in the Oak Cliff area, which is the south side of Dallas as well. But that area, there are so many low-income children, and those children still deserve an opportunity to get an early head start, just as if somebody that's living in Plano and their parents can afford to pay $200, $300, $400 a week for care. I think those children too also deserve a fair opportunity to get an early head start on learning the basics so they can work and be just as prepared to go into kindergarten and just life and come back and be productive citizens in the community. So I chose Oak Cliff because that's where I'm from.
Thank you.
I know there's a question over here. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to go back for a minute to this question about standards.
Yeah.
I work with a lot of the people in this room on figuring out what are the right standards when we go into looking at programs, and people outside this room, and many people who know me know I'm relentless about it needs to be a few things, that we're bombarding you with way too many things. So I want to rephrase the standards question in a different way. Given the standards that you currently have to meet, and I'm really curious, Pearlie, about particularly family engagement, because to me that's the hardest one. Like, how do you create a meaningful standard? So of all the standards you have to meet in family engagement, and I know there are a lot of them, which ones from where you sit are most meaningful? If we had to just pick a few of those, which ones do you think would be the best, or the most indicators?
I think one is getting parents to come to parent meetings. I think that's an important one. Do they come out? Do you have some type of parent-child activities that actually go on at the center? I think that's an important one. Do you have an open door policy where parents can actually come into the center at any time and see what goes on with their children in the center? I think that those are important standards for families, because parents want to see what's happening and they don't want to be left at the door. So I think those are some important. Do you give parents a voice? Do parents have a voice? You know, we have a parent advisory board that we put together just to talk about the menu. Because parents, you know, we have a lot of parents who are concerned about what their children are eating. And so I think that should be looked at. Do you give parents a voice?
For me, it's like at the end of the summer. I usually, although I don't own the home, I usually use the backyard to have like a barbecue to bring all the parents together, because the kids always, talking about each other, about the parents, but they really don't meet these parents, because most of the kids that I serve are transported, so the parents doesn't get to meet each other. So at the end of the summer, I usually have like a barbecue where parents come together with the kids, and it's just like a fun evening in the summer, and it feels so good, and it's an excellent thing that worked for me and my parents.
For us, we have parent orientation as well. We also have parent conferences. So we allow the parents to come in and to see where, to meet with each teacher individually to see where their child is and what the goals are that are set for that classroom. Same thing, we also have parents' voice. They're able to voice their concerns. What else do we do? We do a lot. We have parent surveys, which we also ask parents to complete a survey. That lets us know, I always call it our glows and our grows, of what we need to do and what we can address in accordance and be in line with licensing for the Department of Family and Protective Services. We are willing to make changes and adjustments as long as we are staying within our guidelines for the standards and with the licensing. So we do, like I said, we do projects, monthly projects at home, as well as we have, and I think too, with us providing the free book and the activities to go along with the book for parents, they get an understanding that we are really trying to build that relationship and that partnership with the families. And so our parents are, not all of them are involved at 100%, but I think parents really get an understanding of what we're trying to do in helping their children become successful learners.
Thank you.
Hi, my question is for Miss Bridget, and I'm interested to learn more about how did you come into working with the teen parents, and how do your parents find you, and how long do your parents typically stay with you?
We have something in Bristol called Childcare Choices. They obtain a voucher because through Childcare Choices, and Childcare Choices has a list with all the providers, and most of them from the different neighborhoods. And sorry, what was the question?
So how do they find you?
Well, and how you came into working, it sounds like, especially with these young families who really need this type of care.
Sometimes I wonder myself, and I guess it's some. It made me wonder, and that tells me when that happens that I guess it's something I'm doing that maybe I don't even know. I'm doing it, I guess, and not thinking about it, and it's working. And the children usually stay from birth to 5 years old.
Good, that's good.
And I have another great story. Like about 2 weeks ago, I was in this grocery store, and I was at the register, and somebody came from behind and kind of gave me a hug, and I stumbled, and I almost fell. So I looked around, and with this little girl, of course, she's taller than I am right now. She's 11. And she said, Miss Bridget, she said, oh my God, I have a long time I haven't seen you. I said, hi, how are you doing? She said, do you still go to the playground? Do you still go to the museum? Do you still go to the library? I said, yes. She said, can I have your number, because I'm going to come over the summer to help you take the kids in. I felt that I almost cried. I got so emotional about it. I said, sure, I said. So I gave her my number, so I'm expecting her to call. I know she's going to come back.
Put your hands together for this group. Put your hands together for this group. I am so excited for these women. Honestly, you know, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. You know, at the end of the day, they're the ones doing, I mean, we can write all the standards we want. Somebody's got to execute it and translate it and make it work for children. And the person in the classroom, that instructor on the ground, is the most important person in the system. It really is. And you reinforce that. You've just reinforced that for me. And what I know from listening to all of you and from the providers I've met, you don't just wear one hat. You wear a multitude of hats. And so it goes back to the how and the appreciation that we need to fund the how. And we all need to be intentional about that how. Because if we're going to really make the standards work for everybody, we need to meet people where they are. You know, Pearlie met that dad. That dad was an incarcerated individual who probably had some terrible experiences with public schools. You had a mom who really was not that much engaged, and you had a grandmother who wanted a child to learn, wanted that grandbaby to learn. So she didn't make a decision when that child showed up and didn't even recognize letters or colors. Most of us would have said, oh, well, there's it is. There's it is. No. She became psychologist, literacy coach. I mean, think about it. She began to assess the needs of the family, right? And she pulled on their strengths. Everyone has a strength, and if we start respecting that, we'll start from there. And she valued their strength. And she encouraged, right? She became that coach for the family, not just for her teachers, but for the family as well. That's what equity does. It's in the how. It's in the how. It's really pulling up your humanity and figuring out how to make it work for an individual. Whether it's for the student, the instructors that you have, the educators in your classroom, the parent, the grandparents, and also they didn't speak to that, opening our minds about what we mean by parent. Because that grandma is a parent and is really involved in their lives, and we really need to respect that and engage them. Pull who you can in order to make a difference in that child's life. That's what I heard about the how. And what I heard, the thread that ran through it, is if you don't have those pillars involved in your school system, in your child care system, then you're not going to get the outcomes you need for the children. And so we need to do that. I think Bill has this wonderful thing that they have on their website. It talked about, besides the picture, they have this process, and I might probably get it all wrong, where they talk about equity. Equity starts with you on the personal, right? They talk about the personal, the interpersonal, the institutional, and the structural. I invite all of you all to go and do that and take a look at it. Do an exercise. If your job is as a technical assistant person, how are you looking at equity through the lens of your personal lens? How are you thinking about getting those folks over the wall? How do you look at it institutionally? How are you really figuring out what the structures that are in place within your system for TA that's going to help people get it over the wall? You know? And then as you interact, when you walk into that classroom to interact with that educator, are you there as a regulator? Or are you there as someone who's really trying to get them over that wall? Because at the end of the day, it's the success of the child. It's not your regulations. It's not that checklist. What are you doing to make certain that equity is clear? And then it's structural. The way the systems are set up. Are you collaborating in ways that are real? And you're going to have honest conversations with each other. Are you going to be able to provide it in English or in Spanish? Are you going to provide ways for them to access it? What's your rising agent? Thank you.